Well, Flaco, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I've been such a fan of yours for years now, and I am so grateful to also call you a friend. And shout out to Stamina Sundays for that. So, yeah, let's start with how you got here. You've been making music since 1998. You started from scratch. Yeah, what did that look like?
That looked very, very basic back in the day. I was using a program called Acid on my dad's really old Windows PC, and my friends and I just started sampling other drum and bass tracks just to get drum breaks and like little samples, and then you could use a sequencer, so you could just kind of like take parts and make little mashups, if you will. Hardly call it actually writing your own original stuff, but it was a start. From then on, I was like hooked. I was like, I want to figure out how people write drum and bass. I want to know how they make those sounds. I was just determined. Um, so it started with that program, and then it led to a few others. Um, there was one called Rebirth, which was basically a bunch of 808s and stuff, kind of more for acid house. But then when I really started to learn how to do stuff was when I got this program Reason, which a lot of people still use today, or I do at least. That was still in the late '90s, I'd say early 2000s, when I was first starting to like understand how tracks need to be arranged, how the intros are, how to make the bass not clip and work, and we do the car test. A lot of comparing, like just listening to stuff and being like, okay, how can I get it to sound as close to that as possible?
And the car test, for those who may not be familiar.
That's when you when you bounce out a track, that means that's when you make an MP3 of your project, and then I literally have to burn it onto a CD and then take it to the car, put it in the CD player, and then listen to the audio through the car system, because that's the main place that I was listening to music. So it gave me a really good idea of what needed to be fixed, like if the drums needed to be louder, if the vocals were too loud, if the bass was too heavy, etc. And I think a lot of producers use the car test as a way to gauge what you're working on.
So, did it start with drum and bass?
It didn't actually. It started with just electronic music in general. Basically, riding around with my friends when they all started to drive in the '90s, and people would be putting on their music. And we'd always have this one friend. He was our DJ friend. He bought turntables to the first, like, in our crew, and he introduced me to like all the old trance and house guys from back in the day, like Paul Oakenfold, Sasha and Digweed, and Daft Punk and stuff like that, Aphex Twin. So it was a mix of stuff. It wasn't just drum and bass right off the bat, but drum and bass was definitely like mixed in with it. And a couple drum and bass albums that I remember hearing that really got me hooked was Ronnie Size's New Forms, and Fabio had a mix CD called Liquid Drum and Bass Volume 1, and then Ed Rush and Optical had their Wormhole album. So like there was a lot of different styles of drum and bass in there. There was like lighter stuff and then the heavier stuff. And I knew that music was my favorite in particular. So that's what I kind of honed in on.
So then how did you get that introduction to drum and bass?
It was going to parties, and our good friend Marshall, who was the DJ in my circle of friends, he had bought turntables the first and started collecting records, and he took an affinity to jungle and early drum and bass. So I recognized the tracks. We'd be out and he'd be playing, and I'm like, oh, I like that one, Super Sharpshooter, or like, oh, that one's cool, it's got that grimy bass line. And he's like, oh yeah, you like drum and bass too, huh? Let me show you the ways. And as soon as I could, I started buying records before I even knew how to mix. I wanted to collect records and learn how to DJ eventually. So that was
Mm-hmm.
kind of the starting point. And going to raves and stuff in Florida and sneaking into the clubs when I was underage for sure. Um,
Right. Right.
just to dance.
Just to dance.
Yeah.
So you're in Florida, where you're originally from.
Yeah. Yeah. From
So
Gainesville.
from Gainesville. So what was the scene out in Florida when you're a teenager sneaking into those raves, into those parties?
The scene was pretty cool there. There was a lot going on, especially in my hometown. We had a club called Simon's that did weekly big shows, and some of the biggest names in D&B would be coming there on a regular basis, like Groove Rider and Ray Keith and SS, Fabio and Goldie, and all those guys, and alongside a lot of other, house and breakbeat artists. There was raves down in Miami. I would go to the beginning of what was Ultra in the Winter Music Conference in the late '90s, and then I started going every year until I left Florida.
And so you start making music in 98.
It was always like a really personal hobby of mine. Like I love sharing it with people and stuff, but it was just like something I just felt like I had to do. And it was a little frustrating at first because I wasn't really happy with what I was making. I thought it was too basic, and I was like, I can't get it to sound like, you know, the records I was listening to. But sticking with it and just working on it every day and kind of self teaching myself, honestly. And I slowly started to learn things, got a little bit better, learning about breaks and the origins of what drum and bass is and where it came from, which was a lot of like old funk drummers and samples and stuff. So I started really putting in the time and work, and I noticed people being a lot like more receptive to it when I play it for them. And I was always in people's cars like, hey, check this out. You got to listen to this. And it was also a way for me to hear it on their system, driving around with people with their like 12s or whatever. I think a few years into it, like I finally started to go up to the local radio station and being like, hey guys, I'm a local producer. We play this on the radio. They had an electronic music night there every Sunday night called The Perimeter. It was in Gainesville on Kiss 105.3. So they started playing my demos on their radio station, and I got a huge amount of good feedback from that. And then that was an incentive to write a track a week and bring it up to them every week. And they still weren't that great back then. I wish I could dig up some of them and listen back and have a laugh, but that was a huge start. And then they eventually asked me to, when I learned how to mix better, they asked me to come up there and start playing every Sunday. So that was a huge catalyst in the start.
Right. And then so you start playing, and are you playing there pretty regularly?
Yeah. I was doing that every Sunday. It started to get better and better, and eventually the radio station um, had me delegate a whole night to just drum and bass. So we kind of overtook the perimeter and turned it into like our own personal drum and bass night, like weekly.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
And was there much drum and bass that was getting played on that station at the time?
No. It was a pop station. So
No shit.
yeah, it was like top 40s for the rest of the week. But Sundays from 8 to midnight, we were able to take over. There was also a club in Gainesville called the Soul House, and it was literally somebody's house that had been converted into a club, and it was right downtown. It was really cool. It had a nice courtyard with a lot of like white Christmas lights hanging everywhere, and they had a drum and bass weekly on Mondays called Frolic, and that was a big one for me because I got to see acts from overseas come and play in a personal setting instead of at Simon's, which was like a huge mega club. And there's something really special about that dingy backroom vibe with, the heavy bass. It's really dark, and everyone's just there to like, really dance hard and just zone out and get in their own world. I mean, it was the late '90s, and early 2000s at this point, but I felt like we were still holding on to that 90s rave culture, and got to see some big names come through there. Like the guys that did Planet of the Drums, AK-1200 and Dara and Diesel Boy would be there all the time. And I can't really recall the UK acts because I didn't really know much about what was going on back then, but I definitely saw some big dogs from like Ram and Virus and Metalheads come through there. And there's a famous MC named Skibbity who like carved his slogan in the wall. It said "Deal with the matter," and I was like, "What's
Deal
that?"
with the
And
matter?
yeah, it's just like something he said. I'll always remember that. And the guy that ran the night, his name was Captain Bly. He's like, "Oh, that's Skibbity." You know, he's like one of the most famous drum and bass MCs at the time. And as soon as the internet was able to, you know, you're able to download like MP3s off the internet, whatever year that was. Dating myself here, super dinosaur, but I would download all the Skibbity mixes I could find and just like listen to them all the time, and couldn't understand much of what he was saying because it was pretty sure most of it was gibberish. But
Yeah. Amazing. So you're in Gainesville at the time. You're saying this is the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
You started making music. You're getting into making drum and bass too at this point?
Yeah. At first, it was like house and breaks or whatever, and then I quickly decided I just want to learn how to do drum and bass. I was obsessed
Yeah.
with it. It was all I listened to. Like nothing else would like get into the ears pretty much. And I was learning how to write before I even knew how to DJ, which I thought was kind of interesting because they both go hand in hand. Even though I know people that do one and don't do the other, and that's totally fine.
And so you were teaching yourself how to do all this. How are you learning?
I was working with other people. We'd be producing around each other and kind of learning off of each other. But I definitely had people teaching me how to DJ, like my friend Marshall, who had the turntables, and another friend of mine. His name was Grayson. He was really into metal, but he also loved like the really dark drum and bass stuff. And those guys were really good DJs. Like they understood the concept of beat matching. And before they taught me how to do it, I was trying to mix house with drum and bass, and like you can't do that. Just the BPMs don't match up. But eventually, I got it. And I finally had that epiphany. It was like learning how to ride a bike or something, and then the light bulb clicked on. I was like, "Oh, I get it." And then from then on, it's a constant learning thing. I mean, I don't think I'll ever be a master, but you can definitely keep improving.
Just got to keep at it.
Yep.
So then are you like actively or pretty consistently working on this and developing your skill set? Are you like setting aside time regularly to practice this and get better?
It was my main hobby. It was pretty much like people had skateboarding or video games or whatever, and I was just on the computer trying to write beats and stuck with it. Kept getting the newest versions of the programs. Kept buying records, getting small gigs here and there, and eventually something broke through, and I forgot exactly how it happened, but through doing the radio show on the local FM station, somebody pointed me in the direction of a web series called Bass Drive, and specifically a guy named Jay Stunna out of Chicago. And I started to send him music, and he was really taken by it. And he played my music for the first time in a DJ mix. And I remember thinking, well, that's really cool. I saw my name in like the list of the track listing, and I was like, wow, I've done something right. And huge shouts to Jay and much love. Like he definitely helped, get my foot in the door. And then after he did that, people started contacting me, and they're like, oh, hey, we heard your tune on Stunna's show. We'd like to hear some more. Please send it to yada, yada, yada.
I know somebody named Jay Stunna, Mr. Stunna. Massive shout out to Mr. Stunna and his wonderful green room that has given us all so much for
Yeah.
15 years now.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy, pretty crazy.
It seems like longer, but yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So then was it the green room then that
Yeah. Yeah, it
okay.
was. It was.
Yeah.
It literally must have been one of his first years then. It all started to avalanche afterwards after that. And eventually I ended up doing my own show on there for a little while, called Radio de la Mar, and through that community, I met so many friends like Greg Submorphics and Atlantic Connection, Jeremy Sinistar, a lot of the U.S. folks that are still killing it today.
And had you moved out to California at this point?
No, I hadn't. I moved here 8 years ago in 2013. So yeah, this must have been, if you said 16, you're probably like, this was still 2006 ish. And previous to this all happening, I had taken my first trip to Europe, and I was able to kind of see what it was like there. Went to some drum and bass shows out there, and kind of saw the culture and how I was in Amsterdam, but it was still a whole different ball game out there.
Definitely a different ball game.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your influences over the years. Your dad is, I know, a huge influence. He is a classically trained musician.
Yeah. He went to school for music, and he also built and owned a recording studio when I was a child. So I grew up in this recording studio around musicians recording music all the time, and he's a very talented piano player. So there was always a lot of music in my life, but it wasn't forced upon me. But I was always just there. I was like building Legos in the control room and wandering around, hanging out with rock stars and stuff. And it was a really nice environment to grow up in. It felt like everyone was really cool, and like I was part of something, fun that was happening. And it looked like I was in a big spaceship. And it was, the music was great. Even though I didn't really know what I was listening to, there was a lot of good music that I was being, that was around me when I was younger. When I told him I had this interest in this hobby, he was all for it. I thought he was going to be like, "What? This isn't real. Why don't you pick up a real instrument?" But he's not like that. He's just super supportive. So we've
That's
even worked on,
amazing.
yeah, we've even worked on on music together. I'll be producing something, and I'm like, "Dad, I need a little piano sample," and he's like, "Oh, like this," and he just nails it and sends it over to me. So
Beautiful,
yeah,
beautiful. What a cool dad to have, man. Of the tracks that he's been involved in, do you have a favorite?
yeah, definitely. I'm gonna have to think of the name of this one. It's crazy that my my track list of my releases is a bit larger than I can actually remember at the moment, but it was an older one. It came out on a Brazilian label, probably in like around 2007 or 2008. Gosh, I can't think of it. If you give me a second, I can look it up. But
You can have all the seconds, man. You can have all the seconds.
oh yeah, it's called "Everything to You."
Everything to you.
It's on All Street Recordings. Yeah,
Shout out to dad for
yeah,
everything to you.
yeah. Real nice piano samples there from Papa Smadbeck.
Yeah. So, what influence did that have on you? You talk about how he was really supportive of you pursuing music. How do you think that impacted you?
I think it made me not take it so seriously, but also the most important thing I took away from it was like, if it makes me happy, do it. So that's what his whole take on it was. He was like, if it brings you joy, then by all means, go ahead and do it. And I wanted to put my best efforts into it, and I always wanted to get better. But I also, the thing about, I think that a lot of people get stuck with when they're starting out is the obstacles in their way. It's like, It could be bad feedback. It could be a bad gig. It could be, no pay, little pay. You don't have enough equipment, no musical training, trouble working with other people. Like, so many things can discourage you. But I think just by being easy on yourself and getting the most out of what you're doing and hearing better results, which is easier said than done. But I guess just really sticking with it. And what they say, practice makes perfect. You got to put 10,000 hours in something to become really good at it. So, you just never stop, really. I think at the time when I was sort of starting to have a little bit of a breakthrough, I was surprised that people were taking a liking to my music so much, because I was like, I have so much more to do. I could do so much better. And that was a good motivation there too, because I knew that the best was yet to come, and I could still, still just keep going and just push through all the negative stuff, like kind of dodge that.
Dodge that negative.
Yeah.
Forever dodging that negative.
Mm-hmm.
So you're paving this path forward for yourself. You're running into obstacles, maybe getting really discouraged at times. And then we have this last year that brought its own set of obstacles. What were some of those obstacles, maybe over the years or more recent, whatever you want to speak to? And what has been your process for moving through those, whether it's a process that worked or a process that didn't work and then you later adjusted?
I think some of the main things are just a bad case of writer's block. You sit in front of your workstation and nothing's really sparking, nothing's really igniting. So you get frustrated and then you don't come back to it for a while. But what I've learned to overcome that and writer's block in general is to just at least spend 20 minutes to an hour daily just doing something musical, like working on some drums or developing some bass sounds or sample some vocals or sample anything, really. Just kind of get that first initial layer down, and then it'll be easier from there once you have something to work with. But it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder on you when you're just staring at like a blank canvas and you've got nothing really to work with. And then some other things too can be comparing yourself to the success of others, which a lot of people will be down on themselves about, why haven't I done this? Why am I not here? Why, and that's definitely not a way to look at things at all. You have to look at what you have done and like what you are doing. And you're not these other people. So those are very important things too. And failed collaborations. Collaborating is something you may choose or may not to do with other people. I think it's important. And I've had a lot of failed collaborations, and that can be very disheartening. But I've also had some really great collaborations, and I've met a really good friend of mine, Glenn Easton, through the internet back in the day on AIM. And we worked so well together. We got signed to LTJ Bookham's label, Good Looking, and that blew me away. And like I never ever in my wildest dreams would have thought that would ever happen. I used to listen to his music constantly when I was younger. I had like a mix of his I would go to sleep to, and now we're like really good friends. And
Man,
that's pretty cool to me.
That's amazing. Yeah. How did that sounds like it was probably a milestone.
Yeah. It all started happening pretty quickly, like around 2009, 2008, 2009. I started to develop my sound a little bit better, and I started getting signed to bigger labels, and I started sending my music to the DJs playing on the BBC. And then almost on a weekly basis, I was getting played on there, and it just blew up. And all my heroes started contacting me and playing my music. And it was really, really humbling. And it was the coolest feeling ever. And then I got to start working with DJ Markey on his label, Innerground. And I had releases slated with Fabio's label Creative Source, which was a huge influence for me. But that label ended up going under, but he still supports me. And getting signed with Brian G's label V Recordings in the later future was very huge for me.
So you talk about the collaborations being valuable. What about the collaborations for you or in general you think are can be of value?
You can learn so much from working with other people. You know, you do things your own way, and it goes to say with a lot of crafts and trades and stuff. I'd have to say that you see how people take apart their samples. You see how people arrange their tracks. You see how they test their music, just basically how they operate in general. And when you take all those skills and you apply them to yourself, it can be a huge asset. You can really like develop your skills better that way. And if you find someone that you're lucky enough to be able to work with, you can end up making some really cool collaborative music. And I think it's important for people to give that a shot.
Well, I love the stuff that you've done with Mr. Glenn Easton as well. He's an incredible producer. And so you guys met on AIM?
Yeah, we met on AIM and worked together, just sending stems back and forth, project files. And we actually never met in person until not that long ago, actually. I'd say like 5 or 6 years ago. So we've written, gosh, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 tunes that got signed, and many more too that didn't, for years, with only knowing each other through the internet.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Good old AIM. Of all the challenges you faced along the way, you know, you've come a long ways. Some great things have happened. There have been, you know, you're paving this path forward on your own, learning from scratch, having these various collaborations. Of all the challenges that you have faced, does one stand out as particularly influential to, you know, who you've become as an artist, as a creative?
I'd have to say sticking to my guns and knowing what I wanted to do for myself and not trying to do something for anyone else. It's always good to think about the end result of specifically the music you're trying to do, the music you're trying to play, in yourself as a performer or a producer. But I knew what I wanted to hear, and I think that's kind of the driving force behind how I got through a lot of things. Was if I were out there, if I were in the other people's shoes, I was remembering what it was like when I was younger and I was going out there and I was on the other side of the dance floor or on the other side of the stereo listening to music. What would I want to hear? And if it made me happy and I was like, all right, yeah, this is cool, then hopefully I was doing the right thing.
Definitely. And so was it always that way, or was there kind of like a journey of kind of coming to maybe be more connected to what you're, you know, more?
No, it wasn't. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
It wasn't always that way. It was really unsure at first, for the first, 5 years probably. But I think it was all the little gains, the little successes that kept me. It was like, okay, cool. Well, I'm just learning, so got to give myself a little bit of slack. And I think finally, I have to say, after getting to meet Jay and a lot of the bass drive community, and just realize that there was a huge worldwide connection of drum and bass people that I learned from them, because we would share music and I was able to send people unfinished stuff and they would send me their unfinished stuff and we could talk about it and compare. And I had a real epiphany, like probably around 2004 or something like that. I was like, oh, okay, I understand how to EQ things better, mix. I think the technology was better then, where we could start playing our dubs in live sets with like CDJs and Serato and stuff like that. and that was huge. So it was really good eye opener to hear my progress over the years, and like being very lo-fi to almost sounds just as good as the record I bought the other day. So,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to stick. You have to stick with it.
You got to stick with it.
Yeah.
So, what do you feel drove and continues to drive you sticking with it throughout all the road bumps and obstacles that come your way?
I think it's just the extreme love for the music. It's like it's hard to explain. I think I was talking to you about this before, but when you hear music or you watch a film or you walk into a new space or you visit a new city, you get this feeling. It's a euphoric feeling. You get goosebumps on your arms and stuff, and it's a very special feeling. And I think it's just constantly trying to make stuff that does that for other people and for yourself. And it's a passion. It's something in life that people need. You know, it's people get it from all kinds of things, looking at art, reading books, or whatever. And mine just happens to be drum and bass.
There's something about it, right? Music as a whole is just so incredibly powerful
Yes.
for so many things. And it's also just so simple, you
Yeah.
know?
That's definitely a very beautiful thing about it too, is the simplicity about it too.
It's the simplicity, you know, it brings us together, but then, you know, when we're apart, we can still play a tune and feel connected. And then, you know, there's drum and bass, and then there's the amazing scene and community of people who have this shared, I mean, I feel like love doesn't even do it justice. What is it? What is it? What's going on with drum and bass?
You nailed it. It's kind of an unspoken thing.
It's hard to put words to, for me at least.
Whatever it is, I'm super grateful for it though. And I would be doing this for myself in my room, even if no one listened to it. It's just something I have to do.
And specifically making drum and bass.
Yeah, specifically.
Yeah. So I learned that you were in Ibiza when you were, 15 years old. Please tell me more.
So yeah, that was my first trip to Europe. Flew into Amsterdam. I was with 3 of my high school friends. They were all 3 years older than I am. And I convinced them to go to Ibiza somewhere during the tail end of our trip. We were supposed to go to Italy instead. But we were in Spain, and we were really close to Ibiza. And I was like, hey, look, we can catch this boat. We can go over there and check it out. And they were like, all right, why not? And we get there, and it was just amazing. You know, these big clubs, and the whole island was just party time. You know, it was like some of the biggest DJs were there at the time. Got to see Tall Paul and some other guys, DJ Dan and stuff. And it was a very, very memorable time, especially, you know, it was 2000, 2001. So the rave scene was still pretty good. And just being so young and so shell-shocked to be so far away from home, like, and witness this was very impactful to me.
So this was prior then to getting into drum and bass.
Well, I was still into it, but I wasn't really. I'd written some stuff, but I wasn't really doing much with it. I was still buying records. I still didn't even really know how to mix, but I was listening to it every day. Like that's all I was listening to at that point, for sure. But I mean, I'd go out to the clubs and hear house music and have a great time. It's not like I didn't like it. It was just that drum and bass is always my preferred genre.
We appreciate all music.
Yeah, definitely.
Just definitely love the drum and bass.
Mm-hmm.
So you told me about your first trip to the UK and Ministry of Sound headquarters.
Yes. Fast forward a little bit. I had eventually gotten booked to play my first ever UK gig in Dublin in 2012. And I went and I did that. And I got to meet a couple of my best friends now, Calculon and Dave Owen. And we played a show there. That was a lot of fun. But a few years later, after I had moved to California, I got booked to play my first London gig with some really big acts, with Random Movement, also a great friend and U.S. drum and bass producer, and with Makoto, who I ended up becoming. I was one of his artists for his label, Human Elements, and Lensman was also playing this party, who I'm also good friends with, and that was probably the most epic show I've ever played. It was the real deal under, London drum and bass crowd, huge venue. Everyone was just having the time of their life. Every song, people would just be cheering and going nuts. And during that trip, I got asked to go play at the, Ministry of Sound headquarters with Bailey. And that was a huge honor for me because I was always a big fan of Bailey's, since I was growing up. And he played my music on the BBC. And I'm taking the tube, which is the train, to get there. And I'm walking around, just kind of like, oh, wow, this is nice. And then all of a sudden I hear, hey, don't walk around like you don't know where you are. That's how you get robbed. And I look over and it's Bailey, like on the other side of the street. And he's like shaking his finger at me. And he takes me into the headquarters, and it looks like a, NASA headquarters. There's all these people walking around. So lots of stuff going on. That's also where the club Ministry of Sound is too. And I proceeded to play a live set right in front of him while he was watching me with judging eyes, like hovering over my shoulder. And that was one of the most nerve-wracking sets I've ever played, like live on Ministry of Sound radio for Bailey. I did a good job though, but I was sweating bullets for sure. It was
Oh man. What an audience, man.
Yeah, but that was great. It was such an opportunity, and much love to Bailey for that one.
Much love to Bailey. Yes. So I got some rapid fire for you.
I'm ready for it.
First one. Would you rather have a conversation with your past or future self?
I'd have to say my past self for sure.
Past self for sure.
Yeah.
What is that?
I would just be able to give a few pointers here and there. I wouldn't want to spoil my whole life for my past self, but just a couple things to, mainly with music for sure. I wouldn't, don't want to get too heady with it, but just little pointers about persistence and face-to-face advice and not beating yourself up, which I think I did a pretty good job with, but I think we all kind of want to go back in time and talk to our past self. I think my future self will be okay.
Yeah. Just a few pointers here and there.
Yeah.
What's your favorite vegetable?
Ooh, I'm huge on beets right now. I'm all about the beets. Yeah, put it in everything. Salads, juice, whatever.
They're pretty dang good for you too.
Yeah, they're good. Chock full of nutrients.
All about those nutrients. What are you most looking forward to coming out of this pandemic?
I'd have to say just learning how to take care of myself better. Before the pandemic, I was really running myself ragged. I wasn't eating very well. I was partying too hard. I wasn't doing any self-care. I was just working and trying to compensate that with drinking or whatever. And I'm so much more aware of what I need to do for myself now. So that's one good thing that I can take away from this.
Beautiful. I love to hear that. Got to take care of you,
Yeah, we only have one body.
What's the best thing about being a DJ and producer?
Oh, I'd have to say being able to play the music that I write out for people. That I know that's kind of a no-brainer, but it'd be one thing to hear someone else doing it, which is cool too, but to actually take something that you spent so much time on and then put it into a performance for people live, that brings me so much joy. It's so incomparable. It's like I need that in my life. Like that's healing to me.
Yeah, what do you think that is? Is it the connection? Is it like what is it that
I don't
that
know.
does.
I think it is the connection. I think it's sharing something personal with a bunch of people, and it's very personal for them to see you reacting to that because you're kind of on the spotlight there, and they can really read your emotions. I try to be pretty energetic, and I wear my emotions on my sleeve when I'm playing, and like I might shed a tear here and there, you know. So what?
Yeah.
But I definitely don't get all cheesy about it. But I I think people they feed off of that and they can feel that, and I personally um, love seeing that from producers and DJs. It really
Hmm.
it makes the show so much more special instead of some robotic person up there just kind of like, man, I'm gonna press play. Like that's no fun.
I agree. I agree. What's the worst thing about being a DJ and producer?
uh, Being too hard on yourself and thinking that you haven't done enough and what you're doing isn't good. Um, that can break people for sure. And I feel that on a daily basis. But we have a good community of friends here that try to remind each other. I think I touched on this earlier. Don't compare yourself to other people. Just do what you're doing and try and just keep on getting better.
It's tempting, man.
Yeah, it is.
It's
But don't fall
tempting. We
into
want
that.
to
Don't fall into
compare.
that. That's all nonsense. It's not necessary. Not
We got to
necessary.
stay on ourselves with that.
Yeah. Be easy on yourself.
Got to stay reminded of it. If you had a time machine, what event would you go back to and why?
Ooh. I would go back to the Blue Note in London Metalheads party with Chemistry and Storm. I was lucky enough to see those two play in Miami the year that Chemistry passed away. And that was definitely a catalyst to me getting hooked to drum and bass was that specific party that I was at, which was the
Wow.
Ultra Festival. But the Blue Note sessions in London, from what I heard, are the most talked about, most memorable, and loved era of drum and bass that existed.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite an experience to have had. So what makes a good party for you? Whether you're playing or.
The sound, it's got to have good sound. Without good sound, everything else is shit. The bass has to hit right. It can't be too high. It can't be too bright. Everything has got to be dialed in properly. And as a greenhorn sound engineer for clubs, I'm learning a lot about that. That's a huge one. That'll keep people on the dance floor. And then that turns it into a better party.
Gotta have the good sound. If you could send a text to someone to, a young artist, or it could be a younger version of yourself who's struggling, doesn't feel nurtured, but feels called to create, what would you say to him or her along the way if it was just you'd said one text message?
I'd definitely say keep on keeping on. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't give up. Don't get sidetracked. Don't get sidelined. Stay focused. I mean, this is a long text message now, but yeah, stick to your guns and do what feels right and don't compromise.
Amazing. What makes you smile?
Wow, so many things. I think face-to-face interaction with true friends and family. That brings a big old ear to ear.
To hopefully more of that in the near future, soon.
100%. We need that. We need that in our lives.
We do. We really do. In the meantime, I'm so grateful to be connected with you through the screens that we have available to us.
Same.
I look forward to seeing you in person. Appreciate you being here today, for sharing your art with the world, and I appreciate you. And for those who are tuned in, thank you for being here. Where can people follow you online?
It's always going to be /Flaco DNB at the end of the URL. I know it's not like the greatest thing right now. People are like, what's Flacondaba? And I'm like, Flaco DNB. But yeah. Yeah.
Do you really get that?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it's people just joking around, but
Amazing. Well, the links will be included in the description. I highly recommend everybody go check out what you're doing. You're creating some amazing art. Thank you for your art. Thank you for what you do, for being you. Go check it out.